Welcome to today's episode of Dr. Patty Ann's podcast, where we talk about real relationships. Today's topic is the secret playbook, the unwritten rules of your workplace that will guide your success. So let's dive right in. Every workplace has the official handbook and guide rules that's going to determine what your behavior is, right? And those norms, that handbook, those behaviors, those expectations can be piled high and thick. And they're important to be aware of, right? Usually they're guided by legal considerations for the employer and the employee. And it's important that you know that. However, there's also another just as important, and for the success of your career, perhaps even more important than the written rules of behavior. And that is the unwritten rules and sometimes the unspoken rules that can determine your success, guiding your norms, your behavior, and the expectation of the workplace. Every organization has these unwritten sets of behaviors that will influence your career, both positive and negative. Understanding these rules are so significant because it will determine the workplace that you will be working in, the environment, the atmosphere, and the cultural norms. Ignoring or being unaware of these unwritten rules that determine what will help you succeed will really be to your detriment. So make sure you become aware of it. So another way of looking at the unwritten rules are the silent guidelines that determines and governs your behavior and the interactions among the other people that you work with, both your colleagues and your superiors. And these can range from the dress code, the appropriate way to communicate, what work-life balance is really like, as opposed to what they say it's like, how to navigate office politics. So important. And also how achievements are celebrated and what achievements they care about. Because you might be working really hard, but it might be on a project that really gets very little visibility. Nobody really cares about. It might be yesterday's news. But since nobody told you to stop working on it, you just keep carrying on. So let's go back to the work-life balance example. Why your company might officially support and celebrate work-life balance. The unwritten rule could be that those who stay late or those who make themselves available during off hours, whatever that is, let's say the weekends, holidays, and the evening, those are the people that tend to get promoted. So, does the company really value work-life balance? Or do they just say that because it sounds nice and it looks good in the values of the company? All right. So the written rule might be, we celebrate work-life balance. We want you to have it. The unwritten rule might be that if you adhere to a strict work-life balance policy that's written on the books, meaning you only work during your given hours and you don't return emails during off hours, that might truncate your career. And that's something that you need to be aware of. Also, alternatively, in a company that values innovation, and quite frankly, I don't know any company today that that thinks they're going to be successful if they don't value innovation. But companies that say they value innovation, the unspoken, the unwritten expectation might be that you should always be pushing the boundaries and proposing new ideas, even if that's not in the formal job description. So, other reasons why it's so important to know about these unwritten rules. One, you need to know what the cultural fit will be for you in a company. So demonstrate that you understand and you are aligned with the rules of the companies shows that you're a cultural fit. And this will lead to better work relationships, more trust from your colleagues and your superiors. And for you, an overall more pleasant experience. Now, I hate to bring up politics, but let's talk about that for a moment. If you are, say, left leaning and your company is right leaning, and there's no way that's going to be written down anywhere, but you go into that environment and people start talking politics or they're sending emails, and they do and they will, it might make for a very uncomfortable workplace environment for you through the fault of nobody, right? Nobody's doing anything out of the norm. But if you want to have a cultural fit and you want to feel like you belong and you want people to feel like you belong, they want to work with you, you want to work with them, you need to know what that unwritten rule is for the workplace. The second way that it helps you is it will help you with your career advancement, which we met earlier. Like it or not, promotions, opportunities are not solely based on merit. Is merit a part of them? Absolutely. But we all know people that get promoted because they get visibility to the decision makers. They do a good job and everyone feels like they fit in. They feel like that it's a workplace where they belong. And it's hard to get a career advancement if you do not have access to the decision makers. It's actually probably impossible. The third way it's important is that it will help you be an influencer in your career, with your group, with your team, with your superiors, and it will help you network more positively. This helps you build meaningful relationships in the workplace. And if you've listened to anything I've ever written or anything I've ever said, all success is predicated upon the ability to create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. And the way to do that is to make sure you are aware of the unwritten rules, the secret code of your workplace, if you will. And then finally, knowing the unwritten rules and codes of behavior will help you avoid conflict. Okay. So let's go with the dress code. If the dress code says you need to be very buttoned up. Let's just put it that way. But in the workplace, you notice people are much more casual than the written material suggests. You will look like a fish out of water if you show up wearing a suit or very professionally dressed, and everybody else is much more casual. So be aware of that. So how do you find out what the unwritten rules are? Okay, it's really simple. Observe and listen. Pay attention to the behaviors and the patterns of your colleagues and superior. Notice how they communicate, dress, and make the decisions, the real decision makers. All right. Listen to office chatter. All workplace has office chatter. Within that chatter, chances are you will find out what the unwritten rules of behavior are. So observe and listen. Ask questions. Ask a trusted colleague what the real scoop is, right? You could say, hey, I thought that, this place really, promotes work-life balance, but I seem to be getting a lot of evening emails. What am I supposed to do with that? Do I have to return those emails right away? Or is it okay if I work until the next morning? Okay. So ask a colleague that you trust. They will know if they've been there for any length of time. And then, and this is important, once you discover what those unwritten rules are, adapt gradually. And what I mean by that is you don't want to make a sudden switch in your behavior because that will tend to look fake, inauthentic. All right. You want to gradually become aligned with the unwritten rules. And then along those lines of gradually shifting your behavior, maintain your integrity. I am not suggesting for 1 minute that you shift who you are to fit into the company culture and the company norms, but you can do things and maintain your own integrity. So you just have to strike and find that happy balance. All right. Let's see. A good example of that might be, all right, I know some people that go to work, believe it or not, in flip-flops. Honestly, being more old school in that regard, I'm a little appalled, but I know that that's a norm in some companies. So even though I know I could never go to work in flip-flops, right? I could never show up at a corporate site or an entrepreneurial site in flip-flops. I certainly am not going to wear my dress heels, right? So I'll strike a happy bow. And then also, and this is good across the board for all issues, but certainly for the unwritten issues, seek feedback consistently. Do not wait until your formal review to ask how you're doing. Okay. Ask along the way. Now, I'm not suggesting to show tremendous insecurity by constantly bugging your boss. How am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing? But ask periodically in an appropriate way. Can you tell me how you feel I'm doing? How do you feel my work is going? How do you feel I'm getting along with my colleagues? And how do you feel I'm fitting in with the company culture? All right. So make sure you're aware of the secret code of behavior in your company if you want to not only survive, but thrive. And that concludes today's podcast episode of Dr. Patty Ann's podcast. Since I know you love this podcast, make sure you comment, like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. And until next time, be well.